break out the peanuts and Cracker Jacks. This is Sega Masters. The Master System may have died a quiet death in its native Japan, but the spring months of 1989 showed Sega wasn't quite ready to give up on the platform in North America and Europe just yet, as they continued to churn out titles exclusively for the Western market. We have one such example today, and it's even something we haven't seen on Sega's 8-bit console in a long while: a sports game. In this case, we're looking at Reggie Jackson Baseball, the second, and as it turned out, last simulation of the athletic contest on the Master System, which also happens to mark the first Sega cartridge to feature a celebrity endorsement, and certainly not the last. Sports games haven't graced the Master System since 1987, when Sega rolled out their Great Sports lineup throughout the year. If you remember, the so-called national pastime wasn't left out, as Great Baseball was among the titles released in that series. Despite its first impressions, it wasn't exactly a shining representation of the sport due to its slow, sluggish gameplay, and the fact that it was basically a clone of Nintendo's generically titled baseball cartridge with a TV-style pitcher-batter matchup tacked on. While Great Baseball may have seemingly trumped what the competition was offering at the time, things changed by the end of 1988 as Nintendo's console was receiving its second wave of sports cartridges in the US, and that naturally included baseball titles which outclassed Sega's cart in terms of gameplay and content. Most notably, Jellicoe debuted its long-running Bases Loaded series, and the first entry in the franchise was pretty much the game Great Baseball wished it was. While it followed a similar template, especially the TV-style presentation, Jellicoe's entry offered smoother, somewhat realistic gameplay and decent for its period graphics, as well as a season-long pennant mode. There was also Tengen's fan-favorite Rbi Baseball, which sported fun arcade-style action along with some charming visuals and even a license from the Major League Baseball Players Association, allowing gamers to play as their favorite superstars, or reasonable facsimiles. The arrival of these two cartridges and others most likely prompted Sega to realize their console was due for a more advanced baseball sim to keep up. Tonka, their North American distribution partner during this period, even leaned on the age-old tactic of having a famous athlete endorse their game, which has been done ever since the days of the Atari video computer system in the early 1980s. For those who are curious, Reggie Jackson was one of the top baseball superstars of the 1970s and early 80s. A 14-time All-Star who was known for his brash confidence as well as his batting prowess, Jackson played 21 seasons for the Oakland A's, Baltimore Orioles, New York Yankees, and California Angels, and won 5 World Series titles, 3 with the A's and a pair with the Yanks. Mr. Jackson would play his final season in 1987, closing his career out with the A's. Yet Sega and Tonka probably figured he was still famous enough the following year to snag his name and license for their baseball cartridge, hoping to attract consumers. On a side note, this cartridge was released in Europe later in the fall, only without the Reggie Jackson endorsement as it was retitled American Baseball, and had some generic slugger replacing Reggie on the title screen. Other than the lack of Mr. October's presence, it's the same game as the US version. The cart contains a modest selection of game modes, including Exhibition, Tournament, the Watch mode that lets the CPU play itself, and a Home Run Derby. While there's no official Major League Baseball license or any real players, Reggie attempts to mimic the real thing with the 26 selectable clubs based in actual MLB cities and aligned in similar leagues and divisions. In a nice touch, you get caricatures of each team's manager that amazingly resemble their real-world counterpart during the 1987 season. That does appear to be Tony La Russa at the helm of Oakland. New York's ALT manager is recognizable as Billy Martin, Cincinnati's skipper looks just like Pete Rose, LA's leader is almost a dead ringer for Tommy Lasorda, and so on. Of course, it wouldn't be the last time Mr. Lasorda was featured in a Sega cartridge, but that's a discussion for another console. Once the teams are selected, you pick which of your 4 pitchers to take the mound first, with the others acting as possible relievers, then it's time to play ball. This Jumbotron shows the lineups of both sides, and of course all the player names are fictional. If you've ever seen a baseball game on TV or in person, You know what to expect here, as Reggie Jackson is a straight up simulation of the sport with all the expected rules and action intact. You also know what to expect gameplay wise, as Reggie Jackson Baseball follows the same template used by most baseball carts during the 1980s and 90s, starting with the traditional catcher's perspective for the pitcher-batter confrontation. Even the easy to understand control setup will feel familiar to those who played those other carts, as it follows a similar pattern. Each pitcher has 4 types of tosses at their disposal, and they can vary the speed and direction of their throws, trying to mystify the hitter. The batter in response can move around the box and swing his Louisville slugger at one of 3 heights, either a full swing or a bunt attempt. Once the ball is put into play, the action switches to an overhead view showing the ball in flight and the outfielders attempting to chase it down. Reggie offers the choice of automatic or manual fielding, which determines whether you trust the computer to control the player closest to the ball, or if you'd rather guide them yourself. Although your outfielders can seem a tad slow at times as they chase down the ball, they're noticeably swifter than in this cart's predecessor and can actually prevent routine plays from becoming inside the park homers. The responsive controls make it simple to direct your throw toward the intended base, hopefully in time to tag the base runner. Once you do get men on base, you can have any or all of your runners take a small lead off the bag before calling them back to avoid getting picked off, or sending them off to attempt to steal and even slide to avoid the tag. Most of the downtime that caused great baseball to move at a glacier's pace is thankfully absent in this follow-up, resulting in a much brisker game that doesn't require an eternity just to complete one 9-inning session. Incidentally, once the 3rd out is recorded, you're treated to the slick animated interlude of the Jumbotron displaying an amusing clip while the teams switch sides. The colorful visuals aren't anything special, and even feature one annoying oddity when you begin a session. The playing field comes in one of 3 colors which are randomly chosen for you. The green field is the preferred choice, while the yellow field is a little distracting, and the red field can be hard on the eyes. Unfortunately, there's no way to choose the color of the turf yourself, nor any way to change it once the game begins without resetting the console and selecting your options and teams all over again. Outside of the unnecessary nuisance, the graphics do a decent job for the most part. The pitcher-batter screen has a solid textured look for the playing surface, and the participants are represented by detailed sprites with fluid movements and nice touches, such as the pitcher acknowledging signals from his catcher. During the overhead scenes, the ball movement is smooth and pop flies nicely grow in perspective as it approaches the spectator, to the point of even seeing the stitches rotate on the ball. However, the arching shadows are somewhat deceiving and can make tracking bloopers down slightly harder than it should be. The tiny sprites are adequate for what they are, and plenty of other details are found, including a warning track around the field, upcoming batters in the on-deck circle, relief pitchers warming up, and even cheerleaders, though I'm not aware of any American Pro Baseball team employing cheerleaders. The crowd even moves around to show their excitement at what's going on the field, instead of just sitting on their hands doing nothing. A few nicely done cutscenes pop up for close plays at the plate, as well as the requisite home run celebration if a batter manages to knock one into the stands. Reggie actually goes one further as you're treated to a nicely done clip of the celebrating batter trotting into home plate while the pitcher throws his glove down in disgust, and rightfully so. Even though the action is mostly straightforward, it does have a few humorous moments. Should a batter get beaned, he's carried off on a stretcher while the bench is empty for a brawl at the mound. Then we see someone heading over to first base. The cart doesn't make it clear if this is a substitute runner, or whether the plunked batter magically recovered enough to get back into the game. The audio on the other hand is a mixed bag at best. Sega threw in a soundtrack to keep you from playing in near total silence like in Great Baseball, yet none of the tunes really fit in a baseball contest, and can get on your nerves, especially since there's no way to turn it off. At least the sound effects are somewhat decent, and the voice clips of the umpire are very sharp and clear as he makes the calls. Upon recording the last out to conclude the contest, you go to the stats screen where Mr. Jackson himself gives some thoughts on your team's performance. Then it's off to the next game as exhibition matches or best of 3 battles. Reggie does attempt to offer something of a pennant chase for the solo gamer in the tournament mode, where you repeatedly play the other teams in your division through a succession of games, hoping to bag enough victories to qualify for the playoffs, and eventually the World Series. Even though the gameplay is a much needed improvement over Great Baseball and provides a nice arena for two-player competition, Reggie doesn't really do anything outside of what's expected in a baseball cartridge. There's very little you won't find in any other simulation of the sport, which may disappoint video sluggers hoping for something different or unique to help this cart stand out from the pack. It's not very enjoyable as a solo contest either, mainly due to the poor computer AI you're matched up against. The CPU pitchers in particular can drive you nuts with their wild throws and unreal ability to randomly change the speed of their tosses from 33 to 108 miles per hour, making it difficult to determine whether to swing your bat or not and leading to some frustrating outs. Then again, you could just stand there and let the CPU spot you some runs with a series of bean batters and bases on balls. As it turns out, many of the computer pitchers actually struggle with getting batters out, resulting in quite a few high-scoring slugfests or lopsided blowouts. At least with two human players, the odds and abilities of each side will more or less be even, making for a more compelling contest. Tournament does mean facing the same brainless AI opponent from one game to another, with the uniforms being the only difference, and on top of that, Sega neglected to include a way to save your progress with a battery or password system. Having to repeatedly play the computer through one marathon session means you'll likely lose interest long before the Fall Classic. Finally, there's the Home Run Derby, just about a required feature for any baseball cartridge. You and a second player each have 20 pitches to knock as many round trippers out of the park as possible, and that's basically all there is. Much like the main game itself, this diversion is more enjoyable against a human player as no computer opponents are offered, meaning the solo gamer is just playing for a high score. In conclusion, Reggie Jackson Baseball is a step in the right direction as far as Sega baseball titles are concerned, yet a few annoying flaws of its own do keep it from reaching the Major League of Baseball cartridges. The broken computer AI and lack of a save feature in the tournament won't keep solo sluggers engaged, and at the end of the day, this is just another baseball game with a famous name attached to it and not much else to help it stand out from its contemporary. Regardless, Reggie's mostly competent pick-up and play action makes it a fun, solid choice for head-to-head competition between two gamers looking to kill a few minutes. Given that Sega never released another baseball cartridge for the Master System, the console can at least boast of one half-decent simulation of the national pastime.